Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jennifer Naw. I'm the founder of Campus2City, and tonight we're going to be talking about top 10 tips for relocating after graduation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If one of you would just give me a wave or something so that I know that you can see my screen, that would be really helpful. All right. Anyone having any issues with seeing the presentation? Perfect. Thumbs up. Amazing. All right. So jumping right in, just make sure we've got this recording. I think we do. Wonderful. Okay, so jumping right in, top 10 tips for relocating after graduation. I'm going to be your host this evening. My name is Jennifer Naw. I am the founder of Campus2City. We specialize in helping recent graduates relocate to their new homes after graduation, and more about us in a couple of slides. So brief introduction, I am a Fordham University graduate. I'm a fully licensed agent in a real estate salesperson, I should say, in both New York and New Jersey. And I have been a guest speaker at over 50 colleges and universities talking about what I like to refer to as the post-graduation transition and what it looks like to rent and buy in the various markets that you'll be relocating to. A few fun facts about myself. I'm the former dance captain of Celebrity Cruises. That was my first job and career, if you will, after graduation. From that opportunity, I was able to visit all 7 continents and 70 countries, and I'm really excited to getting back to travel, hopefully soon. And then I also have experience working in fashion startups. So in between my cruise ship career and my real estate career, I did work in the fashion startup world for a little bit, which was a unique experience as well. So diving right into number 10. Number 10, you want to determine your LAPS, L-A-P-S. Now, your LAPS are your 4 main criteria that you need to think about when you begin contemplating what your search is going to look like. So L is for location. Where do you want to live? What are your preferred neighborhoods? Do you want to be in a more residential area? Are you looking for something where there's more action, more shops and restaurants and places to go out? Is commute a factor for you? Do you want to be close to work, maybe walking distance, or do you prefer a commute that's maybe maximum 30 minutes? We usually recommend that you keep your commute to about 30 minutes. That tends to be a good amount of time when it comes to commuting both ways. Up next, you have A for amenities. What are you valuing in the apartment or the building or the home that you're going to be renting or buying, depending on your particular scenario? Do you want an elevator and a doorman? Do you need laundry in the building or in your unit? If you're going to be bringing a car with you, do you need a parking spot on the premises? These are additional things that you want to think about, so you could start understanding what are on your must-have list and what's on your must-like list. Up next is P for price, budget. How much money can you spend per month? What makes the most sense for you based on what your salary is going to be? We tend to recommend the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 budgeting model. So it's 1/3 to rent and utilities, 1/3 towards spending, and the last 1/3 towards savings. It's really up to you how you'd like to do that. That's a more conservative model, but it should give you a good understanding of how much money you'll have left over at the end of the month and help you be able to save faster. Up next, we have S for size, number of bedrooms. First thing that's important to determine, are you going to live on your own or are you going to live with roommates? And then from there, how many bedrooms are you going to need? With work from home being so prevalent right now, do you need an extra bedroom that will act as a home office? Another thing to consider is square footage. In cities like New York and Chicago, square footage does come at a premium. So you may or may not get the maximum amount of square footage that you're looking for. I'm just going to pop into the chat here quickly. I think we have a question. Where did it go? All right. Sorry, guys, bear with me here a second. I don't see the chat. There we go. Oh, Paige, great question. 1/3 pre-tax. Yeah, we base it all off of pre-tax. So if you guys want to go ahead and drop any questions that you have in the chat, if I can't get to them while I'm doing the presentation, we're going to do a Q&A at the end, and I will be sure to read through all of everything in the chat and get those all answered for you. All right, jumping back in. Number 9, the 3-day approach. So people ask us all the time, how long does it take to find my new home? How long should I travel to the particular destination where I'm going to be relocating? And, do I need to be there for a week? Do I need to be there for 2 weeks? The answer is no. You can do it in a matter of 3 days. And we've developed a very easy and succinct method that I recommend that you use to make your search much easier and less stressful. So day 1 is what we like to call your apartment tour day, or your home search day. And what that is where you go out and you see all of the units that are available to you on the market back to back to back over the course of one day. Now, there's a few reasons that we recommend this. The first reason is that you want to make sure that you can remember all of the units. Things are going to start to blend together. What kitchen went with what bathroom and how big were the bedrooms. It's going to get confusing. So it's much easier if you do it over the course of one day with the goal of submitting an application on your top choice unit when you finish your tour. The other reason is that if you try to do it over multiple days or weeks, you're likely going to miss out on your top choice home. So the common mistake people make is that they see 1 or 2 units on Monday, 2 or 3 units on Wednesday. They wait to Friday to apply for something that they saw on Monday, and it's already gone. So the busy season, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides, is anywhere between the beginning of May and the end of October, likely the time in which you'll be relocating. And units in big cities, they move incredibly quickly. Sometimes they're on and off the market in under a half an hour. It's really not an exaggeration. So you do want to be prepared to make decisions. So again, your first day is the most important day of your 3-day approach. You want to go out and see all of those units back to back to back. Day 2, after you get your application in, you're going to handle all of your documents and the lease signing preparation with the landlord. And then day 3, you'll actually sign your lease. We will talk about lease signings more as well, but there's 2 versions that you can run into. That's an online lease signing where it's sent to your email and you sign via DocuSign or a similar program, or you do it in person where it's an actual wet signature and you may actually have the opportunity to meet the landlord. Number 8, the income multiple. So you've gotten a great job or you're going to grad school and you're going to be moving to this fantastic new location, but you need to be qualified for that apartment. You need to make sure that the landlord is comfortable giving you the lease because they trust that you will pay your rent on time. So the income multiple varies across the country. So we're going to give you examples based on the cities where Campus2City is currently working. So that's going to be New York, Hoboken, Jersey City, Chicago, and Boston. And I will also tell you what the sort of national average is more or less, so that you can have an understanding of what that looks like. So no matter where you're relocating, you should be pretty comfortable applying for any landlord and being accepted by them. So New York is 40 to 50 times the monthly rent in annual income. So the best way to understand that is, let's use an example. So let's say you're trying to rent a $2,000 a month apartment. In order to qualify at the $2,000 rent, you're going to need to show at least $80,000 to $90,000 in income to qualify for that apartment by yourself. Now, in Hoboken and Jersey City, they actually take into consideration monthly income as opposed to annual income. So it's 2.5 to 3 times the monthly rent in monthly income. So using my $2,000 a month example, you're going to need to show at least about $6,000 in monthly income in order to qualify in Hoboken and Jersey City. Chicago is also 40 times the monthly rent, but as you may be aware, units in Chicago, they're not as expensive as units in New York, so it's easy to achieve that 40 times multiple. And then in Boston, it's on a case-by-case basis. So what we say for Boston is we use sort of that national average, which is 3 times the monthly rent in monthly income. If you can show that, you should be pretty good for pretty much any landlord. Obviously, special exceptions do happen, but that's pretty much the standard they're going to be looking for. Now, we're going to be offering a couple of Campus2City tips, C2C tips, as we go through our presentation this evening. And the first one is you can combine income for multiple applicants, for multiple roommates. So not all of you need to achieve the income multiple. You have to put all of your income together. And as long as you can achieve the income multiple based on all of your incomes combined, then you're going to be in good shape. You'll be totally fine for any landlord. Now, if for some reason you don't meet the income multiple, or there's a special circumstance where you need a guarantor or cosigner, which is number 7 on our list, there's going to be various things that you can do to add an additional party onto your lease that basically says if for some reason you don't or cannot pay your rent, they're going to pay it for you. Now, a guarantor also called a cosigner. Those terms are interchangeable. Depending on where you're relocating, you will hear one or the other. And what that is they're going to sign on your lease, and they're going to act as a guarantee. Because if you stop paying, they're going to pay your rent on your behalf. Now in New York, a guarantor needs to show at least 80 to 90 times the monthly rent and annual income. In Chicago, it's a little bit more flexible, but typically it's 80 times the monthly rent and annual income. Hoboken and Jersey City, going back to that monthly concept, it's 6 times the monthly rent and monthly income. And then Boston, it's proof to cover monthly apartment expenses, which more or less translates to 6 times the monthly rent and monthly income. They want to make sure that they can pay for themselves first, whether that's a mortgage or their own rent, and then assist you if needed. Now, a guarantor does need to be US based. They have to file tax returns in the United States or be a US citizen or permanent resident, something where they can show income in America. If for some reason your guarantor lives out of the country or they don't show income in the United States, we may have to use what's called an institutional guarantor. So that's going to be the next thing on our list. That's a paid service. Excuse me. And we partner with 3 different companies. The first one is called the guarantors. Then you use Rhino or Insurance. Each one does different things, and some landlords will accept one over another. So depending on your scenario and depending on where you're relocating, we can recommend which one makes the most sense. Number 6, paperwork. Excuse me, something's in my throat. Okay, so paperwork. This is probably the best information I can give you. It's also probably the most important thing you need to do to prepare in advance for an apartment search to make it much easier and more manageable. So I'm going to run you through the list of documents. I'm going to point out the ones that are particularly important, and I'll tell you a little bit more about credit and how to go about building that if you haven't done so already. So first, you're going to need a completed application. So this one, this is easy. It's a summary of your personal information. They're going to ask for your social security number because they are going to run a credit score check on you. But you complete this after you find the apartment that you're looking for. So you can hold off on that one. That's not one you have to prepare in advance. The rest of the list, I strongly suggest you prepare in advance. Firstly, it's a copy of your photo ID. Pretty easy. Driver's license, passport, photo page. If you're here on a visa, then you'll need a copy of your visa or your OPT card. Up next, 2 most recent pay stubs. Now, this one only applies if you are starting your job and then moving into your new home. So we've seen this a lot with the pandemic. People have been working from home, living with their parents for a little bit, and then moving out after they've already started their job. So if that is your situation, you will need to provide 2 most recent pay stubs. If not, don't worry, you don't have pay stubs, so you don't have to supply them. You can put a little star next to the 2 most recent tax returns. That one is really only if you're moving to New York or Chicago. And what they're asking for is the 1040 form only. And it's really the first 2 pages of the 1040 form. And it's okay if you were filed as a dependent under your parents. If you don't have a separate 1040, no big deal. You don't have to show it. But do know that in New York and Chicago, they are going to ask you for it. Now this is the most important. Your offer letter, employment verification letter, or if you're going to grad school, we call it a grad school verification letter. You can put a big circle around this one. So if you've gotten a job offer, amazing, congratulations. A landlord is likely going to want to see a letter dated within 30 days of applying for your new home. So a lot of people get offers like 6 to 9 months before they're actually going to start a job. So the landlord's like, ooh, it's been a really long time. So I would just like some confirmation that that offer is still valid. So that's why we ask you to get what's called an employment verification letter. That's a letter, again, dated within 30 days of applying for a home that simply states your name, your position, your salary, your start date, and that your offer is still valid. If you're going to grad school, you can get what's called a grad school verification letter. You can reach out to the university and they can submit you essentially the same thing, that your acceptance is still valid and you're going to be starting classes on this day. So to give you an example, if you're going to be starting your search on June 1st, no earlier than May 1st, do you want to reach out about that letter so you can be within that 30-day window? Up next, two most recent bank statements. So this is PDF statements only. Please download them off your online banking. They won't accept like screenshots from your phone. They actually have to be the legit statement. So what they're looking for there is that you have enough money to cover your upfront funds. So that's going to be your first month's rent, security deposit. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. Lastly, as I mentioned, they're going to run your credit, and the credit score that they look for tenants is anywhere from 650 to 700 and above, and for guarantors, 700 and above. Now, if you have not had the opportunity to build credit yet, I would strongly recommend that you start looking into this as soon as possible. I would suggest opening what I like to call a starter credit card. So that could be a Macy's card, an Amazon card. When I was in college, I actually had a student visa through Bank of America. That was really helpful to kind of jumpstart my credit score. Typically, it takes about 6 months to a year to begin showing a credit history. So if you haven't yet done that, you do want to begin that process as soon as possible. Another good option is becoming an authorized user under somebody else's card. So that's typically under your parents' card or somebody that has a really strong credit history. So whether that is your parents or perhaps a friend or a close family member who's comfortable with you being an authorized user, you essentially what happens is that you absorb their credit history and it can kick your score up into that 700 range a lot faster than if you were just trying to build credit from the beginning on your own. Number 5, utilities. What is included? So there are 4 main utilities that you need to ask about, and that's going to be heat, water, both hot and cold, gas, and electric. Now, what people don't realize is that they think, the rent's the rent. That's what's that's what's included. Everything's included in the rent. It's one price. No, people tend to forget that there is additional charges on top of your rent that are for the utilities in the home. So be very, very clear and make sure it's written in your lease on what the landlord is paying for and what you are paying for. So in an ideal scenario, you want to have at least heat and water, both hot and cold, covered in your rent. Those tend to be the 2 most expensive utilities. Now, does that always happen? No, but it is the best to shoot for. So if you're trying to negotiate or if there's something that you can do to try to get those included, definitely ask. Gas and electric are typically through a separate bill. And as you can imagine, when you're running an AC in the summer, if you run your AC 365 days a year instead of just in the summer, your electric bill is going to be more expensive. So you just want to be mindful of that. So cable and internet are always going to be separate. Unless a building is running a special, one of our buildings actually happens to be running an initial lease term special where they'll pay for your internet package for the first year, which is great. It's not common. We have seen it come up a few times, especially during the pandemic. And then utility cost, really dependent on usage. People also ask this question a lot. They're like, oh, what can I expect? And it really depends on how mindful you are about turning off your lights and not using your AC all the time and just being really careful. But you want to expect a bill, depending on the size of the apartment and your usage, somewhere between $60 to $250 a month. So let me give you an example. In the winter in New York, if your heat and hot water is included in your rent and you're very mindful about your lights and things, your bill is going to be about 60 to 80 bucks for a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment. That's about right here. On the flip side of that, if you're paying heat, hot water, gas, and electric, you're going to be closer to that 200 to 250 mark at most points of the year because you have 4 separate utilities that you're paying for. So just keep that in mind. Campus2City tip for this slide, if you want to save money, you actually want to unplug lamps and small appliances when you're not using them. So I unplug my coffee maker and my toaster and my hair dryer when I'm not using them, because what ends up happening is that they're sort of siphon off little bits of electricity that are kicking up your electric bill. So if you want to be really mindful, definitely unplug those so that you can really keep that bill down. Number 4, lease signing. So we touched on this a little bit, but I want to go into more details now. So there are 2 types of lease signings, in person and online. So as you can imagine, because of the pandemic, a lot of lease signings moved online, which was great. It actually makes it a lot easier for everybody, but there are still some old school landlords out there who want you to actually sign a physical lease. They're going to have you do a wet signature. They are going to countersign with a wet signature, and then you will be delivered an original copy of the lease after you've moved in. Otherwise, if you do an online signing, it's going to be emailed to you. Either way, you're going to have what's considered an original copy. Now, when you sign your lease, there are payments that are due at the time of signing. The first one is going to be first month's rent. So even if you're not moving in for another couple of weeks, they still want first month's rent up front. That's like your sign of approval that says, here, I'm giving you the money to move in. I am guaranteeing that I'm going to move in on the date that we've agreed upon. And then from there, you just pay on a monthly basis. And the lease terms will let you know it's usually, on the first of the month, your rent is due. The security deposit is usually somewhere between 1 month's rent to 1.5 months rent. Some buildings, if you have exceptional credit, are doing security deposits, like lower security deposit incentives. So somewhere between $1,000 to $1,500 a month, depends on the scenario. So you just want to be mindful of what that security deposit is. So for instance, in New York, back in June of 2019, the law is now mandated that a security deposit cannot be more than 1 month's rent. However, in New Jersey, just right across the river, the security deposit is typically 1.5 months rent. So do be aware so that you're not overcharged. The good news with a security deposit is that it is refundable and you will get it back when you move out of the building, but you do have to keep the apartment in good condition. If for some reason there are more issues with the home than just standard wear and tear, the landlord is going to take money away from your security deposit to fix, the things that are wrong and then give you the remainder. Lastly is the broker's fee. Now, the broker fee has been a big question, especially in the last couple of months with the pandemic and what's going on in various legislation. So I want to break it down so it's a little bit easier to understand. So if you're moving to New York, the broker fee right now, most of the time is being paid by the landlord, which is great. Pre-pandemic, there was some legislature that said that they were trying to make it so that the landlord always paid the broker fee. That legislation has been put on hold because of the pandemic. So we are waiting to determine what exactly is going to happen. So we always try our best at Campus2City to have our apartments be no fee for our clients. Does it happen all the time? No, but if there is a scenario where we do have to charge a fee, we do charge a reduced broker fee. So instead of charging, in New York, for instance, it's a standard 15%, we only charge 1 month. So that's how we sort of compensate if we can't get the landlord to pay. Now, if you're moving to an area like Chicago, in Chicago, the landlord always pays the broker fee. So our services in Chicago are always a no fee home for you. So it does vary depending on where you're headed, but please feel free to reach out. We'll discuss it and we'll come up with the best deal possible for you. Now, how do you pay these upfront funds? People like to try to write a personal check or pay in cash, and the landlord actually won't accept those payments. They're going to want certified funds, whether that's a certified check or a money order or cashier's check, something along those lines. You can also pay via wire transfer or an online payment portal, but don't be surprised that if for your first initial payment, they may want a certified bank check before setting you up with the online payment portal for the payments moving forward. Number 3, negotiating more than just price. So a common misconception when it comes to negotiating a lease to get the best value is that you can only negotiate the rent, the gross rent, I should say. So they're like, oh, I need to get the gross rent down as much as possible, and that's going to be the best value for me. It's not actually the case. I want to walk you through a couple of other things that you can play around with in terms of negotiating that will help you get the best value. So the first one is lease term. A standard lease term is going to be 12 months. Now, if you know you're going to be in the home for a longer period of time, 18 months, 24 months, something like that, you could say to the landlord, hey, I'm actually going to be here. I know I'm going to be here for like at least 2 years. What can we do with the rent if I'm going to be here for a 2-year term? You could work out something where they take a little bit off the gross to compensate for the fact that you'll be a long-term tenant. Or maybe you agree up front to a 2-year term and then there's no rate hike after the first year. Both of those scenarios could be beneficial. Up next, and this is very common right now, it's months of free rent. So right now we're seeing anywhere between 1 to 3 months of rent free. Now, pre-pandemic, if you were getting like 1 or 2 months free, you were doing like really, really well. But now you can even get up to 4 or 5 months free, depending on the lease term. There's a lot of different things happening right now, and I want to explain what that means. Landlords don't always love lowering their gross rent because that impacts their rent roll, which potentially could have issues with their investors or other partners. But the months of free rent are actually go on a different part of the balance sheet, so it makes it a lot easier for them to give free months as opposed to lowering the gross rent. So if you're having trouble getting money off the gross rent, you would definitely want to try getting an additional free month. It actually could save you more money than what they would be willing to take off that gross price. So in conjunction with that, you want to ask if you can pay the net effective rent. That's the NER. And what that means is that in a gross net scenario, the gross rent is what's going to be listed on your lease. The net effective rent is what your rent will be after you take into consideration your months of rent free. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can go about paying the net effective rent. Some landlords will let you pay the net price over the course of the term. So for instance, let's say you're getting 2 months free on a 12-month lease. You could pay the net effective rent every month for the 12 months. And that would satisfy your lease obligation. And you'd be paying a lower amount of money every month. Some landlords won't let you do that. They want you to pay the gross rent for 10 months, and then your last 2 months are free. So net, it's the same dollar value over the course of the term, but it's just paid out differently. So if you want to pay less and take advantage of that net effective pricing, definitely try to see if you can pay the net effective rent. Lastly, free amenities. A lot of buildings and landlords have gyms, pools, lounges, roof decks. I've even seen golf simulators and movie theaters, so all sorts of crazy things. Now, there's usually a fee associated with that. But with the pandemic, again, a lot of that's closed. So I don't think you should be having to pay any sort of amenity fees right now, especially if the amenities aren't open. So try to get those, thrown in at least for your first lease term, and then use them as you feel comfortable, especially as we move through and finish, hopefully get to an ending point of the pandemic pretty soon. Campus2City tip: what is a reasonable amount of money to try to lower the gross rent? We recommend somewhere between $50 to $200 per month off that gross or asking rent. Anything more than that, the landlord is likely not going to pay attention to your application. They're just going to say, oh, I'm going to wait until I get the price that I'm looking for or something closer to the price. We were having people offer like $1,000 off the rent or $1,500 a month off the rent, and landlords were just completely ignoring their applications. It's not worth it. Yeah. So the best way to get the best value is try to lower the gross rent and increase the number of months free. That's going to be really where you're finding the best value for your new home. Number 2, everyone look together. So this is a really common mistake, especially if you're living with roommates. So as I mentioned, the busy season is any time between the beginning of May and the end of October. And in fast-paced markets, especially like New York and Chicago, you can put units on the market and literally 30 minutes later, they're gone. And what's happening right now is that people are bypassing the in-person showing, viewing it virtually via 3D tour or video tour, and renting it without ever setting foot in the apartment. So that makes the market move even faster than it used to. So that's why you have to really be prepared. And we want everybody that's part of the process to be a part of each part of the process at the same time. So if you're going to be living with roommates, you're going to have guarantors, or perhaps you want to have your parents involved, we strongly recommend that all parties attend all phone calls, all virtual showings, if you happen to be doing those via Zoom or FaceTime, and any in-person showings if you are comfortable coming to the destination and touring the homes in person. Now, our Campus2City tip: you want to schedule that apartment tour day. So the best way to do that is you want to schedule your kickoff call. Your kickoff call is a conference call. It has all parties on the line. We set up a game plan for your search, and everybody feels really comfortable and knows what the expectations are. At the end of that call, we set up your apartment tour day. So everybody knows, okay, on this day, we're either going to be touring in person or virtually, and we're going to be committing to these 3 days to make a decision about our new home. If you guys can work out a schedule like that and have one of our certified guides in place to help you do that, your tour and your search will be a lot easier and less stressful. Number 1, how to avoid getting scammed. Now, it's unfortunate that these things still happen, but they do. So, and because of the pandemic, there's been even more happening. So I want you to be aware of what's going on so that you can feel safe and that you are making a smart real estate decision when you do find the home that you love. So you never want to pay your rent, your security deposit, or any sort of fees in cash. True story, I had a client who paid his first month's rent, his security deposit, and his broker fee in cash. He went to the building the day he was moving in. He asked the doorman for the key, and the doorman goes, that unit doesn't exist in the building. He had signed a fake lease and he lost 10 grand. I don't want you to be that person. Yeah. So do yourselves a favor, write the certified bank checks or pay through the online payment portal. There's wire transfer scams that still happen, but if you're working with a reputable landlord and you know who's going to be receiving that wire on the other end, you should feel comfortable sending the wire transfer. Just be careful with who you're sending your money to. You also want to be aware of bait and switch listings. So this is an issue that's happening with these large search engines like Zillow and its subsidiaries. What will end up happening is that Zillow now charges landlords and agents to post rental listings on their various websites. So it's become very expensive to do so, to advertise out to the public. So they'll, instead of posting, all of their availability, they'll post one listing and they'll just leave it up there. And it'll be, the pictures don't look anything like the actual home that you're seeing. The pricing is incorrect or outdated. And it ends up being a real big pain because you reach out about the property, you schedule an appointment, you go to view, and they go, oh, that unit just rented, or actually, that one, we don't have that one available anymore. And it's going to be this one that's available now. And it either looks nothing like the pictures, so it's not what you want at all. It's more expensive. And it just ends up being a huge waste of your time. So just be really careful and make sure, and I'll jump down to the last one here. I strongly suggest that you work with a reliable licensed professional in the local market who has access to the MLS. They're the only ones that are really going to know the full availability based on the MLS, and that is going to help you have a more successful search. Lastly on this list, please make sure that you're actually signing a physical lease. In some states like New Jersey and Illinois, you can have a handshake agreement that acts as a lease, where you actually don't need to paper the terms. I'm not particularly comfortable with that. We don't recommend it. So we always offer leases available. If should for some reason the landlord you're working with not have something, we will be able to help you. We will be able to supply you with something that you can use as a legal document in order to have those terms set in on paper. So how does Campus2City help you find the best home for life's next chapter? Oops, skip one. There we go. So as I was mentioning, large and personal search engines, they really overwhelm you with listings. They can be very inaccurate. You can send out messages for days, never hear anything back, and it's incredibly frustrating. So why not take the frustration out of the process and let a licensed agent in the local area handle all of that for you and provide you with personalized listings that meet your needs, that are accurate and are currently available depending on where you're headed. It'll, again, makes things a lot easier and less stressful. So we've developed a very easy 3-step approach on how we like to do this. So first, we want to put you together with one of our Campus2City certified guides. So all of our guides are trained agents, and they understand the unique needs that recent college graduates go through and what they're looking for, at this particular point in their lives. So we'll connect you with one of the certified guides in the local area. We'll set you up with a kickoff call. And that's basically where you talk about everything that you need to know and you set up a game plan for your search. From there, you'll receive personalized real estate listings. Oftentimes those come directly from the MLS or from the various databases, depending upon the brokerage that we work with. And that will give you all the accurate information that you need so you can preview those homes. And then we'll take you out on your apartment tour, whether that's in person or virtually, to find your new home and help you get through the application and lease signing process and negotiate the best deal we possibly can. So as I mentioned earlier in our session this evening, we currently have certified guides in New York, Hoboken, Jersey City, Chicago, and Boston. We're actually going to be bringing on a guide in Baltimore now. We're just finalizing that process. We're very excited to be bringing them on as well. Now, if you're going to be relocating to a different city that you don't see on our list yet, don't worry, we still may be able to help. We do have access to agents in all 50 states. We may just not have a fully certified guide there yet, but we may be able to put you in touch with somebody. So you're always welcome to email me and I will see who I can put you in touch with to help with your upcoming search. I will give you my email shortly and then I will drop it in the chat. So just a quick introduction to the team. So Caitlin and I work out of the New York office. Jess is in Hoboken. We have Dylan in Chicago and Charlotte and Amanda in Boston. So if you're interested, I think most of you are seniors, but we do have a couple of internships available. I will just throw these out there for you in case you're interested. We are looking for our social media intern and a content writer intern, really positions that are really around content creation, focused around the 4 locations that we are currently operate in. Again, that's going to be New York, New Jersey, Chicago, and Boston. If you're interested in applying or you happen to know anybody that would be, you can send a resume and a cover letter to me, Jennifer at campus2city.com. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope you found the information that I shared helpful and informative. I'm going to jump over to the Q&A right now. So I was going to stop sharing my screen. Feel free to either drop questions in the chat or turn on your mic and let me know what you're interested in finding out. Let me know what you want to find out more about. There we go. If you want to learn more information about us, you can reach us at campus2city.com and on Instagram at campus2city, #campus2city. Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to kick off the Q&A. We've got a poll that we like to do with all of our events just to get a sense for people where they're interested in relocating. So if you guys wouldn't mind filling this out, that will kind of kick us off a little bit. And then I will come over to Marcelli. Is that correct, Marcelli? I think you have a question.
Yeah, that's correct. So my question was about negotiating rent. You mentioned that earlier that it's a possibility to negotiate rent with the landlords, and I was wondering whether that was more typical for renting units from individual landlords, or that also applies to those big companies that have 100 units under management.
For sure. So it's a little bit of both, actually. So you're gonna have better luck. Okay, I'm gonna answer this in 2 parts. You will likely have better luck with an individual landlord dropping the gross rent. You will have better luck getting additional months free from a large property management company. That's sort of the break. Does it happen all the time? No. But if I were approaching an individual landlord, I would try to lower the gross rent before I would ask for months free. If I were approaching a property management company, I would try to do both. So I would try to get the gross rent down $50 to $100, and then I would try to increase the incentives of additional months. That makes sense?
Awesome. That helps. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. I've got one more person. If I'm not sure who it is, but if they want to participate, click the button. Let me know. If not, I'm going to end the poll. Marcella, are we good? I think we got another question. And do you have anything else? You're welcome, Cassidy. Thank you for joining us. Anybody have oh, here we go. 11 of 11. We're good. Now, not surprising that we have 5 considering or going to Boston, 3 to New York, and then another city, state. So Zoom only gives us 10 slots, so we can't put every possible city. So those who are going outside of the destinations that we selected, where are you headed? If you're comfortable, you drop it in the chat, unmute yourself. Philly, okay, cool. Anything else? I'm actually surprised. Oh, Tulsa, okay. DC, yeah, fair enough. I have to say, I'm actually surprised that Boston won. We've worked with a lot of Penn State students, but most of them are coming to New York and New Jersey. Pittsburgh, cool. Yeah, Marceli, we're actually trying to source a Pittsburgh guide right now for another, we work with Fordham University, my alma mater too. So we're trying to find somebody for a Fordham student. So if I find them, I can email you as well. Okay, cool. What other questions can I answer for you guys?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
Can we ask?
Okay.
I'm wondering, how would you suggest going about, any particular websites that we should be looking at that have, the neighborhood crime rates or, stuff like that? How will we actually tell what is a good neighborhood?
Okay, so this is a tough question, and it's a tough question for a couple of reasons. So licensed agents are not allowed to discuss safety of neighborhoods. It's actually a fair housing violation because it can be considered steering, meaning we are telling you to live in one area or not, which from experience, when people ask me this question, I try to answer the best I can, but usually we're not able to give an actual answer. So the best thing to do is to go and walk the particular neighborhoods that you're interested in during the day and then go back at night and see what that feels like. And if you're comfortable during both times of day. The other thing that there has to be various crime statistic websites. I'm not really in a position to recommend what those are, but I have suggested to people in the past, just do a bit of Googling and do a compare and contrast from what you find. And that's really going to be your best bet. Where are you headed, Claire?
I'm going to be in Boston.
Boston. Okay. Yeah. You can also discuss it with one of our guides if you want. They will probably be able to give you a better answer on the crime statistics for that area, or what they're legally allowed to say for Boston and what they're allowed to recommend. But I can certainly put you in touch with one of them and they'll be able to help you.
Okay, thanks. That was great. Thank you.
Marcella, is that another question?
Yes, I actually have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my question was again about the negotiation. At which point of apartment hunt, signing the lease, the negotiation happens? Whether it is during taking a tour, whether it's during application. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Absolutely, sure. So I think this is actually helpful for Gabrielle as well. The best way to negotiate with a landlord is to submit a full application. So most landlords will not pay attention to you unless you actually, like, quote unquote, put your money where your mouth is. Like, they want to see their completed application form, all supporting documents that show that you can pay for the apartment, and likely a credit check to show that you have good credit history. If you can do that, then they're going to start a conversation with you. It's like, okay, this is a good tenant that's going to pay their rent on time. Then they will be willing to talk to you. They're not just going to talk to you, try to negotiate terms willy-nilly if you're not actually serious. Because people will say, oh, I want to apply, but then they don't actually do it. And then it becomes a huge waste of time for everybody. So when you submit your application, you can submit an offer, a rent offer, and say, this is what I'm offering you in the rent. Instead of I'm $2,000, I'm going to offer you $1,900 and I want 1 month free. Something like that. I think that should answer both of your questions, but if it doesn't, let me know. And then Paige has her hand raised.
Yeah, so I have a question following that. So A, is the application binding? And B, if you have a start date with a company, when do you recommend looking for apartments? Like, when is too soon or too late?
Sure. Okay, so I'm sorry. I was just about to answer the first question that you asked and it slipped my mind. Can you ask me that one more time?
Yeah, is the application binding?
Thank you. No, it's only binding when you sign a lease, and then the lease is countersigned by the landlord. So you can, we don't like when people do this, but you can back out after you've applied and been approved.
Okay.
And then ask me the second question again.
What would you say is the timeline to securing an apartment? So you have your start date, and when is a good time to look? When is too late, too early?
So I will use you as an example, if that's okay. So where are you moving? What's your start date?
Boston, and my start date, they gave us an option of June, August, or October, and they're going to tell us in the beginning of May which we get.
Okay. 30 to 45 days before you start your job. That's going to be the best time. So the cycle for Boston, similar to New York, the landlord will find out about 30 days before the lease is up, whether somebody's going to renew or vacate the property. So about 45 days in advance is when we start to understand what the properties are going to be. By the time you hit 30 days, we know exactly what they're going to be. And that's going to be the best time. If you try to start now, it's going to be really frustrating because you're going to be looking at a bunch of buildings and apartments that you can't actually rent. I mean, you could, but you'd be renting them like way too far in advance and you have to move in very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Sean has a question about bank statements. Do landlords want to see statements from checking and savings accounts or only checking account? So Sean, it's really up to you. You don't have to show all assets by any means, but you need to be able to show first month's rent and security deposit. And if a broker fee is due for any reason, the broker fee. So we recommend that you should have in your bank account, we're checking, savings, investment, whatever you want to show, 3 to 4 months worth of rent, your portion of the rent. So if you're living on your own, that would be obviously for the full apartment, but you're living with roommates. Let's say you're living with one roommate, it's your half of the rent times 3 or 4. You should be fine. They just don't want to see that you're like basically all of your funds are going toward your first month's rent and your security deposit, and then you don't have anything left. Especially when you're starting a job and it's going to take you probably 2 to 4 weeks to get a paycheck. So that's where you need to have a little bit of a cushion. Sean, if that didn't answer your question, let me know. Paige?
Yeah, I have another question. So if you have roommates, do you sign different lease contracts, and B, how do you secure it so you're not liable should your roommate just back out for whatever reason? Or is that just
That's a risk you run. So most leases in most states are what are called joint and several leases. So everybody signs one lease and everybody is responsible for said lease. But if you, Paige, stop paying, they will go to your other roommate and try to get them to pay. So they are still technically responsible for your rent if you stop paying. That make sense?
Yeah.
And so I would just, what I tell people is that you should have very candid conversations with the people that you're living with prior to committing with them, to living with them. Because if you have any doubt that they're going to stop paying, you will be liable for their rent. I mean, granted, if it gets to the point, the landlord will take them to court and try to get the money from them. But ultimately, you are still responsible.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Noah, is the turnaround time for an application to be accepted or rejected generally very fast? Okay, yeah, you want to expect 2 to 3 business days. So let's say, I mean, if you apply on a Friday night, you may not hear back till Tuesday, but if you apply on a Tuesday, you should have an answer by the end of the week. Now, taking this one step further, Noah, where are you headed? Philly. No, you should be fine. So yeah, you should be fine. 2 to 3 business days. So if you were looking for a co-op or a condo in like New York or Chicago, it could take longer, but it doesn't seem like that's where you're headed. So it doesn't apply. Anything else? Okay. All right, well, I'll hang out unless anybody has any additional questions. Thank you guys so much for your time. I hope you found the information shared helpful and informative. You're welcome to reach out. Oh, I did tell you I'd put my email in the chat now, didn't I? You can reach out to me if you have any questions, and if we need to connect you with a certified guide, we can certainly do that. Thank you guys. Congrats on your upcoming graduation and enjoy your evening. Yeah, Marcelli.
Yeah, I was wondering whether it's possible to like renegotiate the terms of the lease when signed. Like if you're going to sign again for the second year. Yeah, if you're going to sign again for the second year, like extending the lease, if you can like change.
A renewal, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what type of terms would you be looking for? Like rent, or I'm not necessarily sure I fully understand.
So, like I wonder, usually the landlord tends to like rise the rent like $20 or $30 after 12 months, and I was wondering whether, that's negotiable, or whether, we are basically destined to listen to whatever landlord decides.
It's always negotiable. I tell all of our clients that you should be negotiating your renewal. There's no reason why you should take the first offer that's given to you.
Okay, perfect.
Especially right now in this market, there's no reason. You can negotiate whatever they offer you, negotiate it down.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, if you have nothing else, wonderful. Have a nice evening.